Alright, BobalosRex here. And you know what day of the week it is? It's Sunday. So it's a lore rant. And I got a real lore rant with you because in this lore rant, I'm going to talk about three things and how these things relate to each other, and I have a lot of stuff written down here. Um, but there's even like I may even come up with new stuff here. So let's get into it. You already know about the title and probably where I'm at. Elves, wells, and cosmic powers. Because there's a lot of stuff at play right now, and elves and their wells and cosmic powers are all at play right now for the upcoming expansion. So let's get into it. Let's talk about elves. But let's talk about what elves started as on Azeroth. The original Azeroth creature, mortal, extraordinaire, the trolls. Alright, we started as trolls. Identify as a blood elf here. I started as Tauren. I switched over to blood elf. That's kind of what I do. But I play everything. But man, my mains are usually blood elves. But we started as trolls, and trolls are great. Trolls played around with magic. Do they have wells? Do trolls have a lot of wells? I don't see trolls with a lot of wells, but I do see trolls that did go around a well and what happened to them. Alright, the original well. We all know the original elf well. Alright. The Well of Eternity, which we will be talking about. Here, let's pull it up here. The Well of Eternity here, which we will be talking about. And if you don't know what ended up happening to that well, we'll talk more about that when we talk about wells. But right now we're talking about elves, but it's a pretty big thing. Now, the original well gave us night elves. So, what's going on with night elves? What do we see with night elves, right? So, actually, yeah, let's get into this. So, how do elves and cosmic powers come together, right? So, we got the trolls. What do we see trolls doing? All right, we see them using the elements. We see them teaming up with Loa, life. Maybe they play around a little with decay and death. And they would expand out. We would see trolls expand out using the light and all that good stuff. But I'm trying to think of where stuff started. Okay, then we see the night elves. They kind of throw elements on the wayside, but they do use arcane and mages, so they do kind of use the elements. They also bring Elune into it. Now, it used to be Elune felt more light, but now Elune's more life base, wild god base. So they use arcane, and of course they use Fel. How do you think the demons got here in the first place? Okay, and then we see blood elves. And here's where I really started thinking, right? Blood elves, we see them use arcane. We see them use the elements a little bit, of course. Fire for sure. And related to arcane. We see blood elves use the Fel at a point, We also see them use the light, right? One of the first units to use the light. Well, no, there were... The clerics in Warcraft 3 are high elves, right? The priests, the priestesses. Alright, so we really see blood elves and the light linked together, right? From before the Sunwell got turned to light. So, I'm just saying, we see the light coming from blood elves. And then blood elves have used death, a certain blood elf used death and let Arthas in, so they have used death. And then we get to Void Elves, right? Void Elves can be like mages and warlocks and all this stuff, so I guess Void Elves are able to use other magics, but they are almost completely void powered, right? Because with Blood Elves and Void Elves and even Nightborn, and I feel like it started in Night Elves themselves, but we see this addiction to magic, alright? So, elves, these mortal creatures, you know, trolls, they do like magic too. Trolls do be using magic all the time too. So I don't think they're innocent either. But man, once we get to elves, it's just like we need a power source. They need a power source. Elves like a power source. Alright? So I'm starting to think it's all the way down. Mortals souls crave energy, a power source, a cosmic power, some juice. Alright? You know, maybe some souls don't. You know, but our player characters, most entities, most powers, and mortals we see just taking in a cosmic power and being like, yo, I want more. And you get hooked on one of them, right? We can see it across the board, honestly. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, right? So, what's interesting to me... Oh, wrong thing. What's interesting to me is we look up at Eastern Kingdoms, right? Think about the Night Elves. Truly think about the Night Elves, right? And how much we see it used. I know Elune priestesses are priests, but we know the effects feel arcane, right? Even when people talk about Night Elf paladins, they talk about them looking more arcane, more Elune, and it's like... So they don't use the light, right? Then we talk about the Highborn, Ashara. You see people using, her priest using the light? No, it would have been a loon. And then she flipped to the Legion and did mage stuff. Right? It was mage stuff. Where do we see the light? Right? We don't see it in Night Elves that much. Other than in-game. Other than like the player character, right? Being a priest. Right? But now I'm starting to think, I'm like, what if, right? We get to the nitty gritty, like, Night Elf priests exist. Night Elf priests are loon priests. They function as priests in-game. That's how they function, right? Yada yada. But we see when the Blood Elves move over, right? Over here. That's when they start... We see Blood Elf priests using the light, right? This happened to be where Tyr fell, and the Vrykul and early humans popped up, where the Church of the Light. It really feels like there's a lot of light juice in northern Eastern Kingdoms, alright? Alright? Is it from Tyr? Is it from something else? Because in that short story, they talk about a well of fire. And it's really making me think, man, was the Sunwell... Are they going to make it that the Sunwell wasn't just Well of Eternity water, but Well of Eternity plus light? You know, maybe Darethmar... yeah, was it Dar... All I know is the Sunstrider King led them there for a reason. For the light. Right? Sunstrider. You know... So maybe we will see some more light stuff coming out about Northern Eastern Kingdoms. Because again, Tyr fell here. Tyr was big light. And I don't necessarily think he was the only reason that light is in the area. But I mean, even in Season of Discovery, you saw the light crystal up here. So who knows if that can come into play. Maybe we will see some light stuff up here at some point. Hallowed Ground, Light's Hope Chapel, Holy Ground. So much light. The holy light lore is in this section of the game. Think about every area in the game, right? This is all nature, old god, panda, troll, Kultir, Northrend, Scourge, you know, some Titan stuff. Think about this. This is just light, Sunwell, and it's like, hold up. Is there something going on here? You know? And then it does beg the question, so did the early High Elves meet the Vrykul that were here? Did they see him when they were still Vrykul? And I do wonder, and I hope we do get a lot more lore about here. Maybe we're going to get archaeology back, and we can actually start learning with archaeology. That would be crazy. And then, of course, they get addicted to the Sunwell. We got Nightborn addicted to the Nightwell. And then you got... Here, listen up. Night Elves want to act like we ain't addicted to no wells. All these other elves addicted. We're not. What are moon wells? What are moon wells? What magic are Night Elves using all the time? Nature magic. It's like, hold up. Hold up. You know, I like Cosmic Team Life. You know, somewhat, right? Like, I like the Wild Gods. I like people from all the Cosmic Forces. But it's like, hold up. They on some magic, too. I think every elf is addicted to magic, right? Every elf needs some juice, right? But then you look at humans, they're fine. And then it really makes you wonder, right? Especially with what's going on. Are the elves going to have to learn to deal with no magic? Trolls could give or take magic. Humans could give or take magic. But it's like right from the get. It's like right from the get of Night Elves. And think about where that starts. The Well of Eternity. And who made the Well of Eternity? You look at the maiden on the Well of Eternity. It says made by the Titans. Alright? Or the Titan Keepers. I'm just saying. And then from that point, addicted. Arcane magic. Addiction. Is that the main key of arcane magic? Because here's the thing. I feel like you see it in other magics too. Order, which would be arcane, kind of. So is that addictive? Is that the addictive one? Order? Fell's addictive. Disorder's addictive, I thought. You know? What about death magic? We see people succumb to death magic. Like, I think just magic's addictive, right? I don't think certain ones, but elves, you know, once they got transformed by the well, that addiction's heavy. We do see trolls mixing around with magic too, so it could be innate. Humans have their people that mix with magic, but they don't need it to survive, right? Because that's the thing. It's like, as you get addicted to magic, that's when we start seeing, like, the wretched. And then... Oh, man, I can't remember what it's called. But the Nightborn. The Nightfallen. And them. So, if you lose your magic source... But it's very interesting about losing mana sources, because they talk about wells, right? Is every Blood Elf coming back to the Sunwell taking a sip? No. It's mainly the Nightwell. They got people like crazy addicted, alright? I guess the Sunwell did too. And you can't say that about the Moonwells, to be fair. Or we don't really see that with the Well of Eternity. But that does really make you ask the question, right? And we'll talk about this now. If we lose the Sunwell again with the Void, will we make a new Sunwell? Is that a good idea? Could elves across the board, because we see it with the Nightborn using the tree, the Arkandor, to basically make them able to not suffer from the addiction. Or maybe it sated their addiction. Either way, the Arkandor fruit did better than the Nightwell. And it's almost wondering, like, could we see another tree? Could we see a tree planted over? Oh my goodness. Because the next thing elves like, other than wells, is trees. So it's like, hold up. Put a tree on it. You know, if we're talking about reuniting the elves, the Night Elves would be like, hey, you got a bad well. Put a tree on it. That's what we like to do. It's interesting. I don't think that will happen, but it is interesting. What will the elves do after? If something happens to the Sunwell. You know, and again, the Sunwell here is Blood Elf made. Is High Elf made, right? Unless they discovered it, if new lore can come out, you know. We are touching on Burning Crusade lore. We've already seen some adjustments. But yeah, elves, wells, all this good stuff. But what do wells have to do with the cosmic powers? Well, one, we've seen cosmic forces, cosmic entities use wells as portals, right? On Draenor, they're like, we're gonna go build orcs. And humans, we're gonna build a dark portal. All right, we're gonna build a rock portal. Elves are like, I want a nice little pond. And that's where we use, because that's the thing, right? We see the Legion using them as portals. We see the Void possibly using them as a portal. From what we saw with the Void Elf stuff here when Illyria was here. Could they have been trying to use the Sun as a portal? So wells can be used as portals. We mainly see it used by Legion, but could the Titans use the well as a portal? Which brings up a very interesting question of, like, was the Well of Eternity going to be used as that? They're like, hey, we'll use this later. This well will be good for us later. It'll be great. Life. Could Life use an elf well? You know, you got moon wells. Give a loon power. Is that her way to get through? But we also see Life mainly, like, affect the planet through trees. You know, and the Titans through machines. They don't usually use wells. Using wells have usually been demon territory. But we'll have to see what happens next. Light. Right? The Sunwell is now arcane and light confirmed. Right? Whether or not it was that in the past, which I'm starting to think it was. But now it's arcane. Maybe the Sunwell was light and already here, and they added Well of Eternity to it. Alright? Because I wanted to talk about... I forgot one of my papers. But when you start talking about cosmic forces and magic types, it gets really interesting. But then, I did want to go over the 4 wells. So, Well of Eternity, Titan made, Azeroth powered, right? The pool water is like Azeroth blood, Azerite. It's like Azerite, the well. Maybe a little extra Titan juice if they put something in the water. You know, but according to us, it was a lot of arcane, right? Which could be called order, you know? Then we got the Sunwell and the Nightwell. Both kind of, I guess, got made after the first Elf well got blown up. Saw what that did. Sunwell made, according to the lore we got, made by a bottle. What? Yeah, Illidan took a bottle, and Darthmar, Sunstrider took it and used it to make the Sunwell, the Isles. And then at the Nightwell, that's the thing. I don't know. Let's pull it up. Let's pull up the dang Nightwell. We'll do it live here. And that's the thing. technically, the well at the with Nordrassil above it is the second well of eternity, truthful. So they got a well. Night Elves got a damn well with a tree on it. They got a well with a tree on it. So, like, everyone, elves love their wells. Okay, now let's pull up this dang night well. Here, let's pull up the dang night well. Created by the Highborn. Ah, it was created by the Eye of Elemental. So, the Nightwell, again, both the Nightwell and the Sunwell are at convergence of ley lines, right? They use that a lot. And so that gives to the Arcane. They use the well, which would mean the Nightwell isn't well water. This is, I guess, fully created from the Eye of Aman'Thul, which would mean this is like turbo order, right? Okay, so that's... And this one has time powers, which is interesting when we start talking about multiverse and layers, and that I'm going to get into a second. But, so that's an interesting thing about that well. And like I said, we got moon wells all over the place in that well. This well, it's got a lot of Elune, got a lot of spirit magic. So, we see wells being buffed up with magic. And then in one thing, we see a well's power become a girl. And then that's how we get the current state of the Sunwell with Maru. Avoid Naru being cleansed, put in, we get the Sunwell, the new Sunwell, Light, Arcane. Which again, to me, may just be the Sunwell returning to what it was supposed to be. Because I really feel, like I was saying, that a lot of light magic is in the Northern Eastern Kingdoms. But now let's get on to Cosmic Power. So we see how Elves and Cosmic Powers play. You know, Cosmic Power, Elves get addicted to Cosmic Powers. And then we see Elves change, right? We've seen... Let's think about all the different kinds of Elves we've seen, right? Because we got some crazy ones, like I said. So we got... If we look at dungeons in Burning Crusade, you know, pull up Magister's Terrace, we get full Fel Elves, right? Fully Fel Elves, right? Straight demonic, right? Now, if we remember that lore book, that would mean this is a higher energy elf. Light Elves being super high energy as well. We're going to get into energy levels in a second, but we see Light Elves. If you remember Darkon Drathier down there in Deadhome, we see Dead Elves all over the place. You know, Sylvanas, okay. The closest thing to a light elf is like a paladin, a high elf paladin kind of dealio. But even then, I wouldn't call that like a full light elf. Then we got Void Elves now. And we've seen Druids of the Flame, Fire Elves, Water Elves, Naga. We got... Have we seen Earth Elves? Earth Elves. Maybe. Air Elves. Flying Elves. When are we going to get the Flying Elves? That's the question. Alright. But yeah, so we see many elves. Many, many elves. Basically, arcane elves are Nightborn, man. What it seems like. So, elves get cosmic powers, transform. Just like what Tyr found out with dragons, which really makes me think, man, Titan started messing with elves from the get. Now let's start talking about the cosmic stuff I wanted to talk about in here. So, in that ethereal book, It lays out a lot more stuff for the cosmos. And it talks about energy levels, right? So, high energy realms: light, fire, air, life. Okay? Then the twisting nether. Then they talk about the great dark being the nexus, the center. Then they talk about the realms of death, decay, earth, water, and then void. And they talk about it in energy levels. Now, I want to make something clear. The energy levels, when they talk about the energy levels, energy doesn't equal power, right? But you need X amount of energy to, and in that ethereal book they talk about it, to enter the realm. Or you need to lose energy. You need to, in your extra dimensional traveling device, you need to de-energize. Basically, you need to lose energy to transition into those realms. And souls do transfer into those realms naturally, but there is also some kind of paradox that they talk about with untethered space around how when ethereals lose their soul, they enter untethered space. But what's interesting about that is Koresh, the world soul. Okay, and I want to make this clear because some people are saying that the Mermatian paradox means something crazy, but I think the answer in the Mermatian paradox in the ethereal book, you're probably not even understanding what I'm talking about, but basically, untethered space may be linked to the world soul. Which would mean, just like us, our souls are anchored to our world soul. Because it's talked about as ethereals lose their energy form, they descend into this untethered space, but they're not dead, and they're not going into the next energy realm, which would be like the dead realm, decay, etc., to the void, but they're like caught in this untethered space. And that's what makes me wonder. That could be an explanation of why we see our player characters. Azeroth has its own untethered space realm. Or we just see it in Koresh linked to the planet and where it's at. Because Koresh is also in this place that's almost like void space, right? So, untethered space could be the bottom, the very bottom, right? So there's the void, and then there's an energy level that you just can't go past, and that's the net. And then anything lower is just non-existence. Which is why you wouldn't want to go further on beyond the untethered. Or maybe that's the deepest place of the void. Maybe that's where, the not the void lords would be, but beyond them, But what's interesting about these energy levels, and the ethereal book is basically, it's helping me confirm my theory. Like, remember when I talked about the cube? You have the side, you have like the void, the light, the blah blah blah, and it is leaning into the colors because you see kind of these shades, the spectrum of the energy levels, right, in these realms. And what's interesting is when you talk about, remember when Raden created the elemental planes? If we got planes of fire and air, he basically, the Titans pulled these other planes of existence, pulled from them, or what could be. But they are linked to Azeroth, which is interesting. These planes are. But they basically took parts of these planes of existence and built prisons for the elemental lords and locked them there. Locked them in the realms. So, what that could mean, actually, the more I think about it, that's what that could mean. Is basically what I'm thinking, right? is you have the Great Dark Beyond, right? Think of it as one layer. You have the Great Dark Beyond, and then all the planets of the Great Dark Beyond. And then each planet, right? These big world souls that coalesce energies, right? Because the Great Dark Beyond is made of all the energies, right? And now you have these coalescing forces of energies that kind of layer upon themselves, right? So over each planet, like Azeroth, there's all these layers, right? Including like the Shadowlands of Azeroth. But then, right? And because I'm only making this assumption because we have seen past a curtain, right? We can't disregard that. And the ethereals are seeing beyond the curtain because they see them as these realms. So then in between these planets of realms, there's the in between, that extra dimensional space, right? The in between where we see Tazavesh flying through, where the Devourers are kind of through, and beyond the in between, because the in between is like the in between everything, is what it seems to be. Then you have the realm of light, the light plane of existence, the fire plane of existence, the air plane of existence, right? But again, it's all layered. So they're layered across the whole cosmos. So again, there's a fire layer of Azeroth, right? And you can almost think of it as a multiverse, but not, because there is apparently this true timeline. Now, whether it's true or it's just one of the many timelines, and it's just like, well, it's the true timeline to me because I'm in it, kind of dealio. So either way, now we have multiple timelines, but you still have these layers independently of all the different timelines with the timey-wimey. We still have these dimensions layered over our Azeroth, over Adrenal, right? And then you also, in my interpretation, this is kind of what it's feeling like to me, you also have these great machines built, what we see in the Shadowlands expansion, right? Because we can't ignore this, right? So there's the planetary versions of the Shadowlands. There's that layer, right? Energy layer. And then the Kyrian are who pick you up and bring you to the Great Machine, which then sorts you into the afterlife. So you are in this realm called the Shadowlands, and then off in its own, like, beyond space, there's this machine built by the first ones, love them or hate them, that basically produce the whole realm. Which is interesting, because I can't wait to see some of the other realms, in my opinion. Because in the Shadowlands, you have ordered stuff, right? You'd assume the Titan realm layer would have ordered stuff. And then I start thinking, like, okay, there's three forces that feel a little ordery, right? If you remember an older lore rant I did, where I'm finding these commonalities between opposing forces, right? So Death likes order, order likes order, and light likes order. Alright? Because light likes the true timeline. Light sees one ordered time. Order sees the universe ordered. And death sees life ordered in the afterlives. Whereas then you see disorder, freedom, chaos, void, chaos, infinite timelines, life, infinite growth. Alright? And then you start seeing different fights between the different forces, right? And then what's interesting to me is when they talk about the energy levels, right? If the Great Dark Beyond is the middle, Twisting Nether is high energy. Where is this arcane realm? So is the Twisting Nether higher than the Great Dark? And then where is Arcane? So is Arcane lower? Is Order lower? And then it made me think, if you look at the higher levels, right, and you look at the lower levels, right, if arcane is not higher, which it could be, arcane could be higher, right, this theoretical arcane realm, but it wasn't mentioned, which was confusing to me, and then we link arcane to reality. So let's get to it. So if Fel is above arcane, so you have high energy, light falls to void, right? And here's the thing. The way I see it is you have the light on one side and the void, right? And we're not talking about power levels, but we're talking about states of energy, right? So high energy light and low energy void. These are the primal states, right? And then they work their way in, which kind of helps my theory about light and void being that the more the original force, which matches with the Chronicles and whatnot, and then how the other ones play in. So then we have light, void, and then they work their way in, and then you see death and life, right? And then at the center you see Fel and order. But remember, I'm talking about descending energy. So light descends into void, life descends into death. So then in this chart, chaos, disorder descends into order. In our cosmos, that's flipped, right? If we go based off of our cosmos, right, our physics, what we assume is stuff goes into entropy, right? So less energy. So order kind of spreads out, like we see it as order goes to disorder. But could it be in this universe disorder is leading to this order, and it's like, is the order the seventh thing? Because it really brings me back to that Fareem thing, talking about something outside the six, right? And it really makes me wonder. And then you think about domination magic, and you're like, is the the void may be at the bottom, but is the bottom not void but order? Because we're talking about the Great Dark, because the Great Dark is very heavily affected by the two main forces, like demons come in, titans come in, because they're closest to the energy levels of reality. And then it's harder for life to get in, a little bit harder for death to get in, and then it's the most hard for void and light to get in, but they still find their ways by flinging stuff across space. But it does really make you think. But for me, like I said, a lot of these revelations seem to fit in how I'm seeing the WoW reality. You got these layers, the energy layers. You got the big forces, and how they all interact, and how they have similarities between them, so that neither is wholly bad or good falling into place. And I like that it helped my ordering of stuff, because I put fire and air with like spirit and light, and even Fel, and then I put earth and water with that, death, void, and even order. And I'm liking that. And then, like I said, when it comes to the forces, like not the forces, the magic schools, you have light do holy. I forgot my paper. But think about all the magic schools, and then it's hard to think about a like death. Like, what is that? Shadow 2. And then you got to think about the energies in that. So shadow magic is lower energy, but again, that's not affecting power. It just it takes. It's easier to use because it's low energy, right? Kind of deal. Whereas fire, you have to create energy. That's harder. You know, it's very interesting when you think about it. And then, like I said, with elves, elves and magic and our wells are wholly connected. And I do wonder if after the Sunwell, maybe elves will realize we have to give up wells. Or maybe they'll put a tree on it. You know? Or what new magic will elves be powered by azurite juice? You know, return the well to the natural wellspring of Azeroth kind of dealio. You know, I remember when I first came to the Titan Conspiracy, it was over here. I'll show you what it's about, because this is what really had me cooking. And then I'm done here. Keepers for tampering with the ancient wellspring beneath Tierhold. Waters that once flowed with the eternal essence of Azeroth has been polluted by Order magic. Let's go back to the eternal essence of Azeroth. What is that? Pure Azerite. But then, don't forget, you know, we see sections of Azeroth all infused with different powers. Like I said, I think there's a big light presence here, and I can't wait to find out more stuff in Midnight. And that's it. That's all I'll leave you with. I've already ranted long enough. Bodhi needs attention too. So I'll see y'all next time. Thanks for listening to me rant. Bye-bye.